There's been 3 nights of clashes between police and protesters in Colombia's capital, Bogota, after a man died in police custody. At least 13 people have been killed so far. Last year, this student lost her eye when police fired a rubber bullet at her, but it's not put her off protesting. On Friday night, an apology from the defence minister failed to stop the clashes, which by then had spread to Colombia's second largest city, Medellin. The unrest was triggered after a video on social media showed a man being repeatedly tasered by police. He was then arrested and died in police custody. The killing of Javier Ordonez has struck a chord with Colombians in the same way as George Floyd's killing in America inspired the Black Lives Matter protests.
In a major policy reversal, Bahrain has become the latest Arab nation to agree to establish relations with Israel, as announced by US President Donald Trump on Friday.
They will exchange embassies and ambassadors, begin direct flights between their countries, and launch cooperation initiatives across a broad range of sectors, including health, business, technology, education, security, and agriculture.
Bahrain is following in the footsteps of its neighbour, the United Arab Emirates, who is set to formally sign a deal with Israel on Tuesday. Until now, Israel had only struck 2 similar peace accords with Arab countries, Egypt in 1979 and Jordan in 1994. The Israeli Prime Minister said there would be more Arab countries to follow suit.
With protesters and heavy security outside the courthouse, the 4 fired Minneapolis police officers charged in connection with George Floyd's death appeared together in court for the first time.
We allege the actions of the defendants illegally and unjustifiably ended George Floyd's life.
The ex-officer's lawyers asking a judge for separate trials. In court filings this week, the attorney for Thomas Lane wrote there are very likely going to be antagonistic defenses presented at trial. It is plausible that all officers have a different version of what happened, and officers place blame on one another. Derek Chauvin, the officer who knelt on Floyd's neck, is charged with second-degree murder and manslaughter. The others are charged with aiding and abetting, but all face up to 40 years in prison if convicted.
Just like negotiators in Doha have conflicting views about Afghanistan and how it should be governed, so does the population, like these 3 Afghans. Fahima Mirzai is a Sufi dancer. Exiled for years, she returned home in 2006. Her hope is that the deal won't threaten women's rights. On the opposite side of the political divide, there are men like Ma Khan, a former Taliban prisoner. He believes the Taliban's goal is to bring back Sharia rule. Because although peace talks are starting, the Taliban refuse a ceasefire. On the opposite, they've increased their attacks on Afghan security forces to gain leverage. Another contentious point, the exchange of prisoners as a precondition for talks. 5,000 Taliban fighters, including people who have taken part in deadly attacks, were let out of jail in exchange for the release of 1,000 security officers.
Demanding a way out of Lesbos. On the day they were set to be moved into a replacement camp, refugees and migrants squared off against Greek authorities on Saturday, denouncing the Moria camp as a death trap after Tuesday's fire and calling for their freedom from the island. Leaving Lesbos, however, would require a severe bending of European rules. Asylum seekers arriving to Greek islands from Turkey must currently stay there until they are either granted refugee status or deported back to Turkey. On Friday, Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis met with the Vice President of the European Commission requesting urgent help. Until now, the European Union has been unable to reach a consensus on a unified migration policy because of the divergent interests of the member states. 5 years ago, under the impetus of Germany and France, the European Commission had tried to impose quotas on the number of visitors from each member country.
Now, there's been reports of land grabs in some parts of Zimbabwe. This comes just days after the country's government offered to return land to foreign nationals who were forced off their land decades ago.
Yes, thank you, Morena. What happened is that a Chuma, who is a former government employee, has grabbed a farm called Protea Valley Farm, which is about 35 kilometers east of Harare. That's the farm owned by Martin Grobler. So we have been there. So when we got there, his property was being taken out of his house, and there's a court order actually by the High Court. He had appealed to the Supreme Court that he should not be evicted.
Meanwhile, Vice President Lai Ching-te says Taiwan is locked in an intense silent war with hackers from China. At a hackers conference in Taipei, the VP said Taiwan is grappling with 30 million cyber attacks each month. Many of the attacks are fought off, but some are not, and they result in national security emergencies. A lawmaker with knowledge of Taiwan's information security said cyber defense needs to be a top government priority.
This is all that remains of the Bear Lakes estates in Phoenix in Oregon, all but wiped out by one of those dozens of fires burning across the state. Investigators are looking into whether the fire that did this was started deliberately. Whatever the initial cause, these fires are being fueled by strong, dry winds. Already more than double the average amount of land that burns each year has been destroyed. 500,000 people, almost 10% of the state's population, are now under evacuation orders. Search teams are only now reaching some of the communities that have been destroyed. They expect to find that more people have died.
About 50 people are feared dead after a gold mine collapsed in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo following torrential rain. The mine collapsed on Friday afternoon. According to locals, water went into 3 tunnels near the mine. When people tried to get out, there was no way as the water was flowing in at a high pressure. Locals said that a river close to the mine had flooded after torrential rainfall. The mayor decreed a 2-day mourning period and called on local residents to help extract the bodies. Mining accidents are common in unregulated mines in Congo, with dozens of deaths every year. Chile clashed with its police in Santiago during the 47th commemoration march of the military coup that ousted the government of Salvador Allende on September 1973. Now, the protesters threw stones and lit fire barricades, while police used water cannon trucks to disperse the crowds behind the cemetery gates, where they gathered to pay respects on the memorial of the arrested and disappeared people during the regime that ended back in 1990.
It was a total nightmare for this family when cops burst into their home, which turned out to be the wrong address. And get this, the outraged homeowner is a retired police officer.
To me, it was terrifying.
Luis Rodriguez tells Inside Edition he, his wife, and 2 kids were home in Houston when he heard deputies bang on the door and yell out they were looking for somebody named Curtis Rogers.
And there's no Curtis Rogers that lives in this house. Sir, you have the wrong house. Up to the time when they were coming through the door, I still wasn't sure that these guys were police officers.
I don't think you should open it.
Suddenly, this happens.
Yeah, they're busting our...
The deputies smash the door open using a battering ram.
You got the wrong house.
Chaos follows as Rodriguez and his son are ordered outside. In a statement, the sheriff's office says deputies realized they made a mistake, and the sheriff's office arranged to have the door replaced. The sheriff's office regrets the mistake, and the incident is under review.